Hello, and thank you so much for allowing me to present at the second annual Eco-Ability Conference. Thank you so much, Mike and Joe, for organizing it, and all the presenters, as well as the attendees. It's wonderful, and the medium of presenting allows people from all over the world to present, which is very, very exciting. So I'm going to be presenting on movement of oppressors, an eco-ability perspective on narcissism and the savior mentality in the animal advocacy movement. Uh, so I'm really excited about the presentations that have already gone on, and it's just so much more to present on, and new ideas all the time, and looking at environmental studies and environmental ethics and critical animal studies, as well as disability studies, and how they're all very new, enriching fields that are growing, and then putting them together, and then you're going to have rich information to and perspectives to develop for many years to come. So I'm going to present for here's the outline overview of eco-ability, the 5 C's, normalcy, stigmatization, it's all about us, and analogies, savior mentality, narcissism, and total liberation. And so I'm going to be speaking a little bit about that today, but first I would like to talk a little bit about what eco-ability is from my perspective. It's bringing environmental, animal, and disability justice and liberation together. Justice is addressing a wrong within our society, while liberation is addressing the confinement of a group or individual. So an individual that liberates a monkey, let's say, from a zoo is liberation. They might not be addressing the systematic issues and the exoticism of the zoo, which would be, or trying to close it down. They might just be interested in the liberation of that particular monkey. So you need to speak about justice and liberation, which the field of peace and conflict studies does, and looking at justice as under the umbrella of conflict, and liberation as under the umbrella of peace studies. So here is some ideas that you might have seen before at a different presentation I've done. And eco-ability values difference and diversity, not equity and not equality. Well, equity but not equality. Equality means same, and same and equal are socially constructed measurements to perpetuate normal. Normal being on one side and abnormal being the other, and those that are normal are typically those that are in elite positions of domination and the oppressor, while the abnormal are typically marginalized, oppressed, dominated. So the concept that we're trying to develop is very inclusive, for total liberation, focusing on intersectionality, which it's very interesting that there's a lot of men within our movement that praise total liberation but are very opposed to intersectionality, while intersectionality comes from Kim Crenshaw and other women of color and queer women of color, looking at the experience. So total liberation is the theory, but to experience that theory is intersectionality. So you need total liberation as well as intersectionality to inform one another. Again, in being engaged and looking at digital justice, and looking at how technology is all around us, from the stick that we use for a baseball or a stick to use as a cane, to a wheelchair. So it's a really fine line of when we use technology and when we don't use technology, and how can we challenge the exploitation of nature and the destruction of nature and animals when technology is developed through the medical or military industrial complexes. And of course, collaboration, interdependency, and mutual aid. So next slide, we already know this, that atom liberation, disability, and Earth, within the field of studies, I've kind of noted that. So eco-ability is against ableism, speciesism, and ecocide, right? The destruction of the environment is ecocide. So today I'm going to be, while addressing speciesism, ableism, and civilization, we need to really begin to start talking about normalcy, which is the theory behind civilization. And I'll be talking about civilization. And while primitivists have a good analysis of civilization, environmentalists and animal advocates have never really addressed the complexities and the importance of why we should critically examine and dismantle the concept of normalcy, which disability studies has done repetitively. And it's kind of the invisible hand that disability has. It's the idea that whatever we want to oppress, we first stigmatize, and through stigmatizing them, that you typically have a disability label, from not being intelligent to being crazy to being the other disability labels, and that's how you oppress somebody. So it's this invisible hand that is placed on the oppressor first to stigmatize, and then you can marginalize, and then you can incarcerate, and then you can test on them or kill them. So what we're going to be looking at today, or I'm going to be speaking about today, is more so about civilization and narcissism and the savior mentality and how we got there. So in the 6 C's, I look at, which is rooted on normalcy, is civilization. So we have to first divide ourselves from nature. Then we divide ourselves from people, which is colonialism. So now Europe is different than Africa, Asia, and South America, and Latin America. Well, then when we separated ourselves, what is going to be next is the need for capitalism to take over, which puts a value on everything that exists. Thus, those that are normal have a higher value, those that are colonial have a higher value, and those that are civilized have a higher value, while those that are not non-colonial, non-white, savage, etc., those with disabilities, those are not white, those are not Christian, are less value, so they can be exploited. And then what we do is we have a theory of exploiting people, but we actually need people and groups to go out and to do the exploiting. So we create corporations that are in one's nation state, or transnational corporations that are in multiple nation states. And then from that, what we do is we take items as well as traditions, culture, norms, and we seize them as our own, and then we make a profit off of them, and that's called commodification. I spelled that wrong, commoditization. And then what we do is, once we take that, like Monsanto, we copyright it and own seeds and culture and music and sounds and beats and the way we speak and foods, so people cannot steal it. So that is the 6 C's of normalcy, right, that we have to address. So Johnny Lubinacci and I, stayed up late, and we began to try to address the disability studies and the radical environmental discourse, and look at the conflict within them and see how we can resolve that conflict. And so civilization and normalcy cultivates the labels in order for weeds to be yanked out of the garden of society. So weeds are the abnormal. Here's another slide that we did. Disrupting normalcy is not eco-terrorism. So those that resist, protest, etc. It is dissent against the violence of civilization. So civilization is the reality, while normalcy is the theory, right? So here's, capitalism reinforcing normalcy. It's very individualistic, competitive. It's about efficiency rather than a process. And it's about a production line. And if you can't work on that production line, like Marx said, you can't own the means of production. And then you, of course, will not be a consumer if you are not of normal mental and body, type. There are some really good things about the anti-civ, or the green prim, or the primitivist perspective, which they oppose technology. A lot of technology is not useful, like the military and a lot of the mass medical. But the technology that the disability community makes is very small and minute. And we're not going to be closing down civilization anytime soon. So why burn the bridge if we don't need to? And why don't we engage in dialogue rather than challenging those before we even get into dialogue and saying those individuals with disabilities, which is the largest, not the most oppressed, I don't want to get into the oppressive Olympics, but the largest group of oppressed people in the world, because it spans all different identities: race, class, age, gender, sexuality. So people with disabilities need to be in this conversation, and you can't say, well, just pull the plug, as John Zerzan said in Toronto. I think what he should have said in Toronto when somebody asked him, what do we do with people that are on technological devices to keep themselves alive in hospitals? He said, well, that's a hard conversation. I think we should sit down with people with disabilities and really have a deep conversation, which I think is the whole point of eco-ability, is bringing those people together that are able-bodied and having a conversation, right? Opposing civilization, against transgendered identity, because people that are transgendered want to have body modifications, and then of course we have Lyra Keith and the Deep Green Resistance, which notes that they do not support transgender identities, and sees it comparable to a poor person saying that they're in a poor person's body with a rich man's mind, which is very simplistic and offensive to the transgender community, which they've protested and not allowed that conversation to entrench in a lot of different conferences. So here's the theory of normalcy. Normalcy is a theory that's challenging this kind of sameness, equality, norms which exist within society: going to work, getting on the bus, getting on cars, believing in a faith, taking shower, brushing your teeth, etc., etc. All of these are typical norms, some that are good and some that are not, but they perpetuate being normal. And going to bed at a certain time, waking up at a certain time, and then that whole process of becoming normal is normalization, right? As many of you all know, the normalcy is that is implemented in society, has been the Holocaust, using that as an example. The first people in the Holocaust were tested on and killed were those with disabilities, mental and physical. The next slide, just looking at the U.S. and the prison system, as well as the death penalty, and looking at how they reinforce eugenics and medicine and experimentation, as well as those that have disabilities, that are born with disabilities, are typically adopted or not, or adopted out, or they have abortions for those with disabilities. And we can look at this as the birth defects or the unhealthy baby, and the unhealthy baby is the abnormal baby. The healthy baby is the normal baby, and that's what we want. Is that the doctor tells us you have a healthy baby with no birth defects, right? So within the movement, the animal advocacy movement, We have to start challenging more the language and the images, right? Lauren of the Eco Ability Conference and Marie Hauser and Kim Socha, feminists and queer theorists have really started examining the exploitation of those with images of those with disabilities, and taking and pitting those images and putting them all over Facebook. Then also the images of those with disabilities that are not human, and putting them all over the blogs and Facebooks and making videos of them and pitting them and exploiting them and making it into a non-human animal disability pornography, right? That's as Lauren noted, and kind of Marie Hauser articulates in her article that's in the Journal for Critical Animal Studies, the special issue. So we have to look at the imaging and the objectification, and it's not by coincidence that these women, which are feminists, have articulated this and not men. And I didn't see this. It's because they've experienced it, and they're feminists that view the world in a different way, and see the objectification, which is one of the main essence and foundations of feminism, is critiquing the objectification of individuals, right? So here's an example, a decent book, but the title in itself is, A Vegan Freak. So Taurus and Taurus writes, so regardless of how, quote, normal you are in a world where consuming animal products is the norm, you're always going to be seen as the freak if you obviously and clearly refuse to take the part in an act of consumption that is central to our everyday lives, our culture, and even our very own personal identity. And this is very true. But we also have to challenge this as well through a disability and a critical normalcy lens, right? Which the book didn't do. But I think, they do challenge culture and the consumption of everyday living in society, which is, really a critical sociological analysis. But perpetuating the, quote, freak, I think that needs to be articulated, and that's why I kind of use this example. And, The Freak by Robert Bogdan, The Freak Show, he noticed that there's two types of freaks: those that are Native American, First Nation, indigenous groups, and those that, quote, are the monster in freak shows or in circuses, right? Those that have different able bodies. So then there's GaryFranchione. His work is important within property and identity, but rather than, he's very well known for this concept of moral schizophrenia. Those that eat meat. So you have schizophrenia if you have meat, and you have a, quote, moral schizophrenia because your morals are in jeopardy and split personality. You love animals one minute, but you eat them the next. So it's a negative term rather than an uplifting term. And of course, he doesn't like people that eat meat and those that test on animals. So he's using it to stigmatize those that eat meat, rather than saying schizophrenia. Those individuals, there's nothing wrong with them, and there's nothing wrong with being schizophrenic. But he doesn't. Rather than apologizing, he digs himself into a hole trying to justify, which many people do, and I'm just using GaryFranchione and as one example of many, because he didn't apologize. Rather, he makes it very clear why he wasn't an ableist, right? So I say again, some people think that by using the term, I am stigmatizing those who have clinical schizophrenia because it implies that they are immoral people. I am sincerely sorry, and I mean that. If anyone had interpreted the term in that way, and that is certainly not what I intended. Well, the Irish proverb notes, the hell's paved with good intentions. It's not about intentions. It's about not using the term, and listening to those that are oppressed and being their ally and being in solidarity, which Joe Lessenschaltz really notes, right? We have to begin to listen rather than kind of articulate and tell what the oppressed wants, right? And that's what this whole title of this paper is about. The oppressor being in the movement, right? And we're never going, humans are never going to give up our freedom and our lives so others can live. So we have to know that we're going to compromise on our values and on our beliefs. So I think that's what we have to understand, is that, is there going to be real animal liberation? Are we really doing what the animals want us to do? Well, I think they wouldn't probably want us to go to the government and ask for larger cages. I also don't think that they would care two hoots if we did something illegal or not illegal. I think they would probably want to do more radical and extreme actions so they can be freer a lot quicker. But we're not going to jeopardize our freedom for them. So we have to really own that that we're not going to do everything that we want to for them. So we'll do what we can unless it jeopardizes our freedom or our comforts. So, and the comforts meaning, like, do we have to give up cream cheese? Do we have to give up milk? Do we have to give up the taste of white fish or sausage or hot dogs or hamburgers? No, now we have an alternative. So really being vegan and animal rights, we have the ability on a volunteer basis to leave the movement at any time because we're not the ones being oppressed. So if repression really does occur, many people leave the movement, and that, we've seen that in the 1990s where a lot of people were oppressed, and some people, sadly to say, were arrested and incarcerated. And they're, those individuals, many of them are still involved in the movement today in a variety of ways, while many others just left and are now meat eaters and drinking and and very not involved in social justice movements. And I want to note there's nothing wrong with drinking, or anything of that sort. But I was kind of wanting to note that they're chilling back and relaxing and watching a movie and not caring about the oppression of others. We have another person, who's done a lot for the animal liberation movement, but he's galvanized himself in the disability movement. So if you say animal rights to people with disabilities that know anything about animal rights, they're going to see you as suspect because of Peter Singer. And people on Facebook recently said, "Oh no, Peter is amazing and wonderful on Facebook," and they said, "No, he's never said anything of this sort." Well, let's look at this, and this is not me writing this, but this is Peter Singer writing this. He says this in Rethinking Life and Death. To have a child with Down syndrome is to have a very different experience from having a, quote, normal child, right? What is normal? And he's now perpetuating the concept of normal, and that Down syndrome doesn't mean normal. It can still be a warm and loving experience, but we must have lower expectations of ours. So like a deficit model, what we do in schools, right, for children with. So we cannot expect a child with Down syndrome to play guitar. Well, I was in a school with physical disabilities or mental disabilities, and with children and students that had Down syndrome. And yes, they did play guitar, drums, violin, and piano. So Peter Singer is wrong. They can't enjoy science fiction or learn foreign language, chat with others about the latest Woody Allen movie, etc., or play basketball or tennis. Yes, I've seen all of them do that. So again, he's a philosopher. He's not a psychologist, a medical doctor, a teacher, any of these things. So, and he's very opposed to those with even believing in those with Down syndrome, and believes that they should be tested on for the betterment of society. If it would, that's a utilitarian perspective. So PETA perpetuates normal and tries to challenge what is normal. Being vegan is normal. That's what PETA says. Why do we have to be normal, right? Why can't everyone be different? That is a beautiful and ecological society that is in balance when everyone's interdependent and everyone's different. A very weak society is where everything is normal and the same. So they said if you drink cow milk, you will get autism. Well, first we have to say that that statement again is false, and then second statement is that autism is nothing to be ashamed of, and it should be embraced rather than an epidemic, which many of society has made it out to be. So now, don't don't drink milk, as PETA would say, and so you won't get disabilities. But also, if you don't eat milk or don't drink milk and eat meat, then you'll be skinny and sexy. And that's kind of the targeting of women. And then the targeting of men is to be strong and masculine. And we can see the videos, and some of these people are really nice people, but they're being exploited and perpetuating, of course, also that all men should have six packs and bench press and run hundreds of miles a week, etc. Again, we need to really understand that eating, a vegan diet is not about being healthy or looking good or being sexy. It's about an ethical and moral decision, and we need to get back and complicate, the discourse rather than just giving a literature and saying go, be sexy, eat meat. We should say no, be moral and ethical and not eat meat, right? I think that's what we need to start emphasizing. And here, here's more images, and other organizations do this too as well. It's just the sexy symbol of going vegetarian. You look like Pamela Anderson, which, much of Pamela Anderson has been airbrushed on this picture, but then she also had, plastic surgery. So this is not normal. This is not natural, right, what we're looking at. Again, don't look like a whale. The analogies that are perpetuating that is in our society, that to make a quick argument, we make an analogy. Do you support the Holocaust? No. Then you don't support slaughters of animals. Well, no, those are two different experiences, and we need to, somewhat address that. Here's again the muscular, strong. There's 5 men in here, 3 women. It's about these individuals, and some of these individuals are very nice people I've met, but that's not what veganism is about. Veganism is about not harming animals, and that's what we should never get away from. So analogies again. The Holocaust is, and it will always be, different than the slaughter of animals. Slavery that occurred from Africa to the United States and in Europe is a lot different than an elephant being chained for a circus. And someone doing that will never experience or never understand what those two have gone through. And to, quote, understand that the other oppression is minimizing on that one's experience and the event in history. So we shouldn't understand. We should, try to sympathize and value and engage and learn about that experience, but not try to, quote, understand, because we'll never understand what it means to be another identity or be in an experience that we've never been into. So racism doesn't equal speciesism, and speciesism doesn't equal sexism. Equal is a socially constructed measurement. Racism has its own experiences, speciesism has its own experiences, and sexism has its own experiences. We shouldn't make these broad-stroking statements, even though they're very easy and it can sway people in our argument. But by swaying people in our argument, because we don't want to articulate a theory or moral, ethical belief and philosophy, what we do is we use analogies and broad-stroking statements which minimize and offend a great amount of people, like the Jewish community and people of color and women, which has been the case through the last 30 years with these analogies. So stay away from analogies when they're very one-sided. I think that would be the point I would like to address. Again, the savior mentality, when we're not about making the analogies, we're about ourselves. And so it's when we take pictures of ourselves with goats and chickens and hens and roosters and pigs, is it really about the animals, or is it look at what I did today? I'm better than you. Look at Brad Pitt. Look, I saved youth, from Africa, and now they're in the United States. Look at Madonna. Look at Paul McCartney. In the Special Olympics, in the disability community, they always said, "Don't pity me," right? Keep your pity, at home. No more, no pity. And I think the concept of pity is a very philosophical term where you belittle an individual and you reinforce the oppression and the inferiority of and the less than of one group, while believing that you are superior and dominant with another group, rather than believing in difference. And I believe that the special, quote, special, what is so special about them then isn't everyone special? And I think the concept of special is very much a pity analysis, because we say that they have disabilities, meaning that they have that they're less than, but then when we pity them, we lift them up to a level that they don't deserve in a normal society, quote, normalcy, and that is the framework of pity. When we uplift somebody where they don't, they receive something where they don't deserve something in a perspective of the superior, right, from the inferior. So, I have a few other, few slides going. The solidarity, developing our own narrative, those with disabilities or listening to animals in the ecology, do not try to understand but respect, focus on oppression, do not compete on who is more oppressed, and don't get involved in the oppressive Olympics. We need each other, and every experience is very valuable. So I think that, as Fred Hampton would say, yellow power for yellow people, brown power for brown people, black power for black people, and white power for white people. He believed in power for all people. And Martin Luther King was the same way around the janitors and the anti-war movement and uplifting other movements. And that's why he became a threat when he started bridging the gap. And Malcolm X was the same way after Mecca. So we have to start fighting for total liberation, unity, accountability, responsibility, and a holistic and radical approach, getting to the core of something, right? And here's a book I did, Igniting Revolution, that brought different movements together. And then we are, again, total liberation is intersectionality. So thank you so much. I really, enjoyed the presentation.